All right, everyone, we got a great episode for you today. We're going to talk about in-season throwing. We're going to break down a 6 and 7 day throwing schedule as well as a reliever schedule. With that, Josh is going to talk about what he does in between starts to prepare for each outing. We're also going to touch on weightlifting briefly and what that can look like in between starts. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode.
So I'm in season, I'm 16, and I'm throwing 78 miles an hour. I don't have time to be thinking about, I don't want to be sore for my next game. I need to be pushing myself. I need to be pushing my body. I need to be lifting as heavy as I can and still getting in that throwing program. I see so many kids these days be like, hey, I don't want to be sore for my game because I'm starting on the weekend. But you really have to assess your situation and be like, are you really where you need to be? Are you where you want to be? And if not, then maybe it's time to consider to push yourself, even if it's in season, and it might drop your performance in the short term.
How did you get to that conclusion? Like, what brought you to that point to where you realized that's what you needed to do?
So it was really just looking at my competition and not comparing myself with the people around me, because chances are, if you're not playing in like college or professional baseball, the guys around you aren't that great. They're not going to be throwing that hard because not everyone goes to a powerhouse university or gets drafted or anything, right? So I compared myself more to the guys who were getting recruited to those powerhouses and who were those draft prospects. And I actually looked at the perfect games a lot because those guys are studs. They're throwing, 93, 94 miles an hour. And so I compared myself to them and I was like, all right, I need to be there. And right now I'm not there. So I really need to be pushing my body, even if it's in season, and play the long game here to get to where I want to be.
So being in Australia, what did the season look like? Because you took a little bit of time off from games, right? Just to train? Or what was that schedule like for you?
Yeah. So in Australia, we have two seasons. It's summer baseball and winter baseball. And so the summer is really like the main season that happens. But when I was 16 and I was throwing, 78 to 80 miles an hour, I looked at myself, I was like, is playing really going to get me to where I want to be? And because at that time, especially, it was pretty evident that I needed to gain velocity and I needed to be at least, 88, 90 to be recruited or to even have a chance to go pro ball. So I said to myself, am I either going to play or maybe I can go train for a year and then see where that takes me? And so, yeah, I took a full year off of playing. I didn't play a game for a full year. I actually went out to Seattle Driveline for 3 months and just trained there with all the guys in that atmosphere and did weighted ball pull downs every week. We got caffeinated and, went crazy and just tried to throw the crap out of the ball and did plyo velos, and just doing that over and over for a year got me like really significant really significant results. And that's how I got to where I was.
Yeah, I love hearing that story. And I haven't heard it in detail like that, but I've obviously heard you talk about your journey to pro ball and how you weren't where you wanted to be and you did what was necessary, which in this case was going to Seattle, getting in a good training environment and following a good program where you could work on your needs, which at the time was velocity. Now, as you transitioned into games and got back in competition mode, what did your, you don't have to go in detail, but like at that age, at 17 now, what did your schedule look like? Did you just go from all this training to, okay, no training at all, now I'm just playing? Or like, what was your lifting? What was your throwing like? Were you still following a fairly regimented program?
Yeah, I was following a pretty scheduled program. Even when I was playing, I made sure that I was only pitching once a week which made sure that I could get some velocity work in during the week as well. So basically, I would be starting on Saturdays, and I would throw, like 80 to 100 pitches, which is a lot. Um, but I would take some rest, and then on Wednesdays, I would do my bullpens. And during those days, I'd usually do like a pull down right before my bullpen, or like a plyo velo right before my bullpen. And so that way I'm still getting that stimulus and that work in, the velo work in, even during the season.
Yeah, see that I love that. I feel like that is a really good transition from going from no competition at all, you're purely training, to now you're getting into competition, but there's still that training aspect because I'm sure a year later, yes, you were better, but you still weren't where you needed to be to get to where you wanted to go, which was Stanford being your dream school, playing professional baseball. You hadn't reached the pinnacle yet. So it wasn't like you could abandon all of your training and now it's let's just compete. There was a transition of still having a big training focus. And then now we're testing it once a week. We're throwing on Saturdays, but throughout the week leading up to that, you're still training, you're still working on things, and then you're stress testing it, once a week. And I think that's a really good blend and a really good idea for guys that are, want to play summer ball or want to play fall ball if they decide they want to do that. That's a manageable way to where you can still get your training in, but also test it against hitters to make sure you're going in the right direction. Now, some people need to completely get out of competition like you did for a year. But worst case scenario, I think this is a really good option for guys versus the alternative of playing a Thursday through Sunday tournament. You're pitching 2 times. The other days you're kind of just playing catch and waiting till you go in the game. And then you're sore, so you're not going to throw on Monday. And now all you have is Tuesday, Wednesday before you got to get ready for the next tournament. And for guys that really want to make substantial progress, that's just not going to work. You're only going to get so good. Yes, you're going to get better from some of the in-game type stuff, which is completely valuable. Totally agree with that. But for most people, there is a skill aspect of velocity, of off-speed pitches, of those types of things that they are missing in order to get to where they say they want to go, which is usually Division I schools or professional baseball. You have to get to that baseline of what those numbers look like we've talked about on previous episodes. If you're not throwing a certain velocity, if you're not throwing enough strikes, if your off-speed pitches aren't sharp enough, you're just not going to get those opportunities despite playing 60 to 80 games in a 6-month time period. So that's where you have to step back and be honest with yourself of what is the most important part for you to get better right now. And I'm impressed with the fact that you were 16 when you made this decision. That's a really big decision. Looking back on my own career, in high school, I played all the time. I only played one sport. It was baseball. I played spring, summer, fall, winter. I never stopped playing. Yes, I would work out, but I wasn't training as that being the main focus. It was purely about the games, and the training was kind of secondary to that. So yes, I got better from the pitchability standpoint. I was very accustomed to every type of situation in a game, which is very valuable. But I was missing some of those early skill acquisition time period where I could have improved my game a lot at a young age, purely by doing the fundamentals of just getting stronger, moving well, and actually trying to throw hard. So I love the fact that you did that at such an early age, from 16 to 17, and then you transitioned into testing it once a week in games. So now when you got to pro ball, how old were you when you signed? Were you 17, 18?
I was 18.
You're 18. Okay. So, and how hard were you throwing at that point?
I threw at a pro day right before signing, and I was 93 to 95. This was at the Driveline Pro Day.
And you were 18 at that.
Yes.
Right. So you're touching 95, you're 18 years old. Like that, there's a lot to like there from the pro side of things. So how much did your training change when you signed your first pro contract with the Phillies, going from what you were doing, on your own with Driveline and some of the things that you were doing as a part of your programming? How did that shift once you got to pro ball?
Yeah, it shifted a lot just because before that, it was all about, all right, I need to be in peak performance to showcase. And I think showcasing is so different to actually competing. In showcases, you need to be peak performance in velo wise and stuff wise and command. Like, yeah, you need to be throwing strikes, but it doesn't have to be like, all right, you're hitting your spots. Um, when it's competition time, that starts to matter a little bit more. And so my training changed a lot where it was not as much of a velo focus. It was more of, okay, let's do an execution. Let's focus on executing pitches. Um, and even the lifting side, we were making sure that the body was fresh every time I go out to start. There was no, oh, I lifted too hard, so I'm too sore for this game. It's no, like, let's make sure that you're ready for this game because, Pro Bowl performance is what matters. And that's what we prioritized.
You were a starter, right? Right when you got signed?
Yeah, starter.
So at 18, 19 years old, your first, couple years, what type of a rotation was it? Was it like a 6-day rotation or a 7-day? What was your schedule like?
I've only ever been part of a 7-day rotation. And I've been a part of a 6-day rotation briefly when I got to high A. But my whole pro career, this is my 6th year now, I've just been part of a 7-day rotation, which is pretty cool because you just pitch once a week.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, that's how college is, right? And that's a lot of times one of the biggest adjustments for college guys going to pro ball is now shifting to a 6-day. And then usually once you get to AA, definitely AAA, you're now on a 5-man rotation to prepare you for the big leagues. And like those extra days are huge from a recovery standpoint. So if you're not dialed in with your weekly routine and season on what you're doing in between starts, by the end of the season, you're just going to be beat. You're not going to have anything left because you're just not going to be recovering. You're going to be weaker. Long days at the field, like you're just not going to be performing like you were at the beginning of the season. That's just why in-season training is so important. I think that's why we want to talk about it today, because we're in season for college guys. Pro ball is, in full swing to spring training now, and being on top of your training on a weekly basis, whether you're a starter or a reliever, is paramount to your success as a pitcher. So give me like just a brief rundown. You can go as deep as you want, but from like a throwing standpoint, let's just say you're starting on a Friday. What would your week look like from that Friday to the next Friday leading up to that next start?
Yeah, this really depends on how I'm feeling. Last year, I took a really lighter approach because I was dealing with some stuff, especially with my elbow. So last year, it would be if I pitch on Friday, I'm taking Saturday completely off. And then on Sunday, I'm doing plyos only. And I'm not touching a baseball. And then on Monday, I'm playing light catch. And then Tuesday, I would throw my side. And then I'll go light catch again, moderate catch. So Wednesday, light catch, Thursday, moderate catch. And then Friday, I'm back on the mound. And that's like a super light schedule. And I made it that way just because I was a little bit worried about my elbow. But normally I would probably go Friday pitch, Saturday I'm doing light plyos just to get some blood flow going. And then Sunday, probably like a moderate, maybe like a small touch and feel. I'm going Monday side, Tuesday light, and then moderate, and I'm back on the mound. So I feel like I can get a lot of work done on those moderate days. So if I'm feeling good, I try to do as many of those as possible, especially if I can touch the mound after the throwing program. I feel like I get a lot of value out of that. So yeah, I try to include as many of those as possible.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what does a moderate day look like for you? Is it doing some plyos, playing catch out to 120, and then doing a little touch and feel on the mound, or like what's a moderate day like?
Yeah, a moderate day is plyos, like a full plyo routine. It's not max effort. I'm more of like a perceived effort type guy instead of a distance. So I'm going at about 70% the whole day. So 70, 80% plyos. I'm going through my whole routine. And then I'll probably get out to 90, maybe 120. But I'm going 70, 80% the whole time. And then I'll touch the mound for 10 to 15, just feeling out my pitches and executing them.
I like that. So you're touching the mound. I'm trying to do the count in my head 3 times in between starts, roughly. If you feel good that week, you're touching it at least in some capacity 3 times in between starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is great, right? I mean, I say this all the time. The mound is where you make your money, right? Like we don't get paid to throw on flat ground. So getting as good as you can on the mound, assuming that you're keeping the intensity and the volume in check and that you're not overdoing it, getting those reps on the mound is critical because it's a different feel. I can spin the ball great on flat ground and then I can get on the mound. And because I have a little bit more time in the air before my foot lands, my timing is going to be different. So if I'm just getting really, really good at flat grounds and I'm not seeing the translation to the mound, that could be a simple adjustment that you can make as a pitcher is just transfer that flat ground work to the mound, keep the intensity the same, keep the volume the same, and work on your pitches there. So you're getting feel for it on the slope with the different timing of being on a slope compared to flat ground. How much time do you spend on flat ground compared to mound when we're talking about spinning breaking balls and throwing changeups and all of your pitch types?
I throw all my pitches on flat ground, and I kind of go back and forth with this because if I spend too much time on the mound, I feel like I start to think about my mechanics a little bit too much, and it kind of domes me up. So I think there's a fine line there. Um, but I do like throwing all of my pitches on the flat ground, and I don't really see too much of a difference feel wise. So I can get a lot of quality reps on the flat ground as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think, and I don't want people to take the wrong way. I do think that throwing your pitches on flat ground is perfectly fine, especially like if you're about to throw a bullpen. I think throwing a couple of each pitch just to get feel for it is a good idea before you actually get on the mound and you start ripping them, just to get feel for spin. Like I do drills on flat ground all the time to feel spin, but what I often see is guys will throw a 15 pitch flat ground of all their pitches every day, and then they just throw one bullpen a week and their pitch shapes are different in some cases, or their execution of the command is different. So it comes back to knowing yourself. Like you know yourself. You just said when you're on the mound too much, you think about your mechanics a little bit more. You can get in your head a little bit too much. So that comes to you've done this long enough to know what is valuable for you, how you're going to get the most out of your catch play and your mound work. So you know what your limits are. For younger players, as they're discovering this, that's what you have to figure out. How much flat ground do you need? How much time do you need on the mound? Are you a guy that actually can keep the volume and intensity down? Because some guys just purely can't. Like even in pro ball, you see guys, it doesn't matter if it's a light day, a medium day, a high day, they're throwing at the same velocity. They're trying to throw the same amount of pitches. Like they just cannot regulate their volume and intensity. So if that's you, you have to know that. You have to know that when you say you're throwing at 70%, you're actually throwing at 90% and be able to adjust your volume accordingly so you're not overdoing it and doing too much. Do you see the same thing with some of your teammates in pro ball?
Oh yeah, for sure. There are a lot of guys who are doing a light day, but they're just ripping it. So, and it might be light for them because they throw 100, but it doesn't look light at all. But I wanted to ask you, like, why do you think the pitch shapes are so different? Like you said that sometimes when you throw too much off the flat ground, it affects the pitch shapes. Why do you think that is?
I just think it's purely from the timing difference. So on flat ground, I have less time to get my arm up. I have less time to rotate. So my arm might be a tad later. My hips might be a touch more closed compared to the mound. Because of that slope, I have a little bit more time for my hand to travel or for my body to rotate, which can throw things off just a little bit. And I also think it just comes down to the repetitions. For me growing up, there was so much focus on flat grounds to where I threw way more grips and pitches on flat ground compared to the mound. And then when I actually got on the mound, it actually felt weird at times to be on the mound, especially for my first few pitches, just because I wasn't used to being on the slope. And my pitch shapes would change slightly. Usually it would result in getting more depth on my breaking balls compared to on flat ground. It'd be maybe more sweepy when I'm trying to throw like more of a sweepy type slider. And on the mound, it gets a little curveball-ish because I have a little bit more time for my hand to travel. Just little things like that. It's not for everybody, but for me, I noticed that earlier in my career, especially when I was in high school and college. I just spent too much time on flat ground, and my stuff was nasty on flat ground. I thought it was like the best stuff ever. My catch partners would be telling me that. Maybe they were lying to me. I don't know. But when I would get on the mound, my stuff was okay, but I could tell it took a considerable step back from where it was on flat ground. And I should have realized I just need to spend more time on the mound, and I'm doing way too many grips on flat ground. But looking back now, hindsight's always 2020.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And do you think that there's any value in So this was actually what I was thinking about the other day with you Darvish and how he has a completely different pitching delivery when he's playing catch versus when he's on the mound. And he said that that just absolutely just revolutionized his career and um, improved his command by so much. Do you think there's any value in that for like people listening?
I think there is, but I actually want you to share that story. I've read, I think you posted a thread about it, but tell people a little bit more about what you're talking about with Darvish on exactly what he does in his catch play that's different.
Yeah, so I can't remember what the year was, but it was when he was with the Cubs, and he has a YouTube channel, and I love you, Darvish. So I watch all of his videos. They're all in Japanese, unfortunately, but fortunately, I can understand it. And what he posted a video saying, "I think my career is done," and I was like, "Dang." And it was a video of him throwing a bullpen, and his command was just not there. It was terrible. But then it was a couple months later, he said, "This saved my career." It was a video along the lines of that. And he was explaining what he did. And he was saying that he built two separate pitching deliveries, one for when he plays catch and one for when he's on the mound. And so his theory was that the brain constantly wants to seek stimulus. So if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, if you're throwing with your pitching delivery over and over again, the same one over and over again, it wants to seek some kind of stimulus, something new. So it subconsciously alters it just a little bit. And then he said that that made his delivery get out of whack every time that would happen. And he noticed that happen. Like subconsciously, the brain would try to change his delivery. And so he was like, all right, how can I fix this? And what he came up with was the two deliveries. So whenever he's playing catch, he's throwing with, he said, like a super relaxed motion. He just like, like super relaxed, just, and he's throwing. And then the way he described it on the mound was that he's really crisp and intentional with what he does. And he said that that just like really improved his command and helped him a lot just so that the brain has a new stimulus every day. And that's the story of how Yu Darvish saved his career through the differentiating his delivery.
Yeah, I mean, that is variability training right there, right? Seeking a different stimulus and challenging himself in different positions, different feelings, different cues. And by doing that, when he actually does do his regular delivery, he's able to be more consistent because he has stress tested in a way his delivery to where, you could even take it a step further where guys could throw from different arm angles, different tempos. You can change every single aspect, and it sounds counterproductive, right? If you think about it, it's like, okay, so I'm doing something different than when I actually pitch, or I'm doing something different or with every single throw. How am I going to be more consistent when I'm actually doing my regular delivery? But it's because there's always some form of variability in your throwing. Think about it. You've thrown, now in pro ball, it's a little bit different, but it's still the same concept. Every mound is different, right? Some mounds are steeper, some are flatter. If you come into the seventh inning versus starting the game, the mound is going to be in a different condition. So there's all these slightly different variables. The weather's different, the batter, all of those things. So if you can make those variables amplified, if you can make them even more challenging, your body's going to be able to adapt easier when you're actually trying to do your normal delivery. So it's about challenging that bandwidth and trying to, as a result, make yourself more consistent. And there's a study done. I don't remember the exact study, but I'll try to explain it the best I can, with basketball players. They were testing free throws and how to improve their free throw percentage. One group, all they did was shoot free throws. That's all they did. No other type of shot. They only practiced free throws. The other group did everything but free throws. They did 3-pointers. They did jump shots, layups, just anything you can think of besides free throws. And when they retested, the group that did no free throws at all actually improved the most at free throws compared to the group that only did free throws. And it comes back to the variability. They were challenging themselves. They were seeking a greater stimulus rather than just doing the same thing over and over again. And as a result, they were actually able to be more consistent at the free throws. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I actually have, and that's such a interesting study, and it actually makes me think like maybe I should get off the mound less. But yeah, no, I try to incorporate it a little bit with my catch play. So I do a lot of athletic throws. So when I'm going out, I'm trying to be a shortstop and I'm throwing off one leg. I'm running a couple yards to the left and then jumping and throwing. And it looks a little bit weird, but I really like it because it loosens me up. And I feel like it does a little bit of that variability training. And it has helped me a lot, I feel like.
No, I love that. And what it does too is just it's promoting athleticism. It's promoting freedom, less thought. You're just doing. You're not thinking. And that's what happens with a lot of guys that struggle with command or consistency on the mound is they start to overthink, right? And that's what you said when you're on the mound too much. Sometimes you start to think about your mechanics too much. You get in your head a little too much. Doing athletic based throws can free you up a little bit mentally and allow you just to execute.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I was feeling, especially coming out of rehab. It was 2022. I had got surgery on my back, and the rehab throwing program is very, very structured. It's all right. We're taking one step and we're throwing, and we're doing one crow hop and we're throwing, and it just became really, really robotic. Sorry, and like I started to feel a little bit like of the yips again because it was just so like, okay, this is getting robotic, like one step throw, and then you make a bad throw, and then you don't really have that athleticism to make an adjustment. And so just incorporating the athletic throws just made everything so much smoother, and it freed up my body and also my mind.
Yeah, for sure. I actually have seen that a lot, unfortunately, with guys that are rehabbing is they do start to get yipped up because of, like you said, how structured it is. There, it almost feels like you have a new arm if you had an arm surgery or your back feels different. Like there's something different. So you're already thinking about a lot of things mentally because your body wants to protect itself and you don't know for sure if it feels safe to actually throw. And you're thinking about all these things. And it can be very easy to get in your head and to start pushing the ball and to start missing bad, and then more thoughts snowball on it. So if you're not a rehab setting, try to eliminate some of those thoughts is the main point, right? We want to be as free and as athletic as we can. And that's why you'll see some guys when they're long tossing over 200 feet, they can throw the ball within 5 feet of the chest, and then they get at 60 feet or 45 feet and they're spraying it everywhere because there's more thought than just the freedom of stretching it out and throwing, which is one thing I like about long toss or stretching it out a little bit. It's just, it's more free of thought and you're just moving athletically. And as Alan Jaeger would say, more of your authentic delivery. It's your most authentic delivery because there's freedom in the throw.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that the Texas Rangers has incorporated a lot, especially last year. We'll, as pitchers, instead of PFPs, we'll do like shortstop drills where we'll take ground balls and then throw it across. And there was actually one day in instructs where we would play catch and they would tell us to keep our eyes closed and throw. And they're like, hey, just trust your body. And like, we would do all these weird things and we're like, God, what are we doing? But now that I know the concept of variability and trying to be athletic and mixing up your throwing, it actually kind of makes sense a lot. And now I try to incorporate it in my throwing program.
Yeah, that's great. I actually heard Greg Maddux used to throw bullpens every once in a while with his eyes closed just to make it more challenging and more fun.
Dang.
But I
That's
think there's a story to it. Man, I wish I knew it off the top of my head, but there was something to it to where forget like the catcher didn't know that he was throwing with his eyes closed or something. And like someone made a joke like, man, that was like one of your better bullpens. He's like, really? My eyes were closed the whole time. I didn't even see it.
dang. That's absolutely next level. I've tried it in catch play a couple times, but never in a bullpen. And I don't know if I have the courage to try that, especially in spring training.
Yeah, when there's 10 other pitchers
Yeah,
lined up, yeah, you might hit another catcher.
yeah.
But
So
okay, let's dive into a 7-day schedule. So if you're watching here on YouTube, I have a couple slides here of just what a possible schedule could look like for you from a throwing standpoint. So this is for a 7-day, and this goes along with basically what you said your plan was. So day one would be game day. So throwing wise, whatever's comfortable, 90 feet, 120 feet. Some guys like to stretch it out further. Mound plyo. So I'm a big believer in doing plyos on the mound. Now, on this day, on a game day, I leave that optional for guys. So, like, if you're a guy that likes to do reverse throws, pivot picks, figure eight throws, like something along those lines, do those pre-throw, play catch, and then optional to do your mound plyos, whether it's step backs, walking wind up, something more athletic on the mound before the pregame bullpen starts. I leave that up to the individual on what they want to do on their game day. Day two, in this setting for a 7-day, completely off, just like you said for your first option, your lighter schedule, completely off day two. Day three would be more of a lighter day, 75 to 90 feet, 60 to 70% RPE, no mound plyos, no bullpen. Day four would be more of a moderate day. So this day you'd be going 90 to 120 feet roughly, maybe a little bit further, 70 to 80% RPE. This is a great day to do mound plyos at that 70 to 80% effort, working on something mechanical or just trying to get feel for the slope, whatever it is that you're working on. This is more of like an over the rubber internal focus type of day. And there's no actual bullpen afterwards. Day five, this would be your bullpen day. So stretch it out, 150 or, it just depends on the individual. For in this case, what I've written down is about 150 feet, building up to 90 to 100% effort, mound plyos, and then do your bullpen. Could be one set of 20 to 30. You could split it up into two sets depending on what you're trying to work on in that bullpen. Day six would be a light day, 75 to 90 feet max, 50 to 60% RPE. Like this is a really light day, 15 to 20 throws, no mound plyos, no bullpen. And then day seven, the day before your start, a low to medium day, somewhere in between. Once again, this is kind of similar to game day. I like to give guys freedom on this day to do what they think they need to do to get ready for the game. So 90 to 120 on average for most guys, 60 to 70% RPE, optional mound plyos, and then also optional touch and feel. Some guys like to touch the slope the day before they pitch for, 8 to 10 pitches at low effort just to feel the slope. But that is an option. So this is pretty similar to one that you said originally with one bullpen, but still touching the mound maybe a couple times for a touch and feel or even some mound plyos.
yeah, for sure. I think the only difference would be that I'm touching the mound a little bit more. Maybe I'll touch the mound on day three a tiny bit, and then day four I'm definitely doing a full 10 to 15. Lighter 70 to 80%, but I'm definitely on the mound just feeling out my pitches.
Perfect. So this is like the standard option, right? Like especially for college, this would be a standard typical schedule for a college pitcher. That's if you're starting on a Friday, you're throwing your bullpen on a Tuesday. Option two, this is a 7-day still. This is for guys that want to touch the slope more in the case that, like you said, day one would be game day, same as before. Day two, instead of being completely off, you would have a really light throwing session, 60 to 75 feet, 50 to 60% RPE, no mound plyos, no bullpen, of course. Day three would be a medium day, 90 to 120, 70 to 80% RPE, mound plyos. This is your internal focus day, your mechanical focus day. And then day four, you would throw a bullpen, one set, 15 to 20 pitches. Day five, light, once again, 60 to 75 feet, 50 to 60% RPE. Day six, another bullpen, a little bit lower intensity and possibly lower volume than the one you threw 2 days prior, but still getting in that 80 to 90% RPE range for one set of 15 to 20 pitches. Day seven, the day before your start, super light, no mound work, just light catch play. What's nice about this one is if a guy really needs to spend more time on the mound, you have an opportunity, with these two bullpens. Yes, they're shorter bullpens, but what you could do, one option would be that first bullpen on day four could be more of an over the rubber type of bullpen. So internal focus, maybe they need to work on something mechanical, or you need to design a pitch. Or you even want to do like a velo type thing where they want to do a velo ladder, something velo focused in season. It could be a day for that. Something just more internal to where you're not focused on the execution of the pitch. And then that next bullpen could be, your 15 to 20. Maybe you do 4 simulated batters to get locked in and back on a command focus. And then, of course, the alternative is you could, flip flop, or not flip flop, but you could intermingle those to where both of them are command focus days or both of them are internal focus days. Probably wouldn't do that in season, but there is a unique situation for everyone. But this is a good opportunity for guys that really have specific needs of what they need to work on. This just gives them an extra bullpen to actually work on those things.
Yeah, I really like that. I never heard of the over the rubber days, internal focus days. I actually really like that. And I've seen people do, um, this schedule and have 2 internal focus days as their bullpens. But usually those are the guys who have just no trouble throwing strikes.
Right.
They're in the zone every day, but they need to develop a pitch or work on a mechanical cue to get their velo up. But I really like that internal focus one day, and then the next day is execution. I might actually try that.
Yeah, I got the whole concept from Derek Johnson, the pitching coach for the Reds. I heard him speak at a conference back in 2016. At the time, I want to say he was with the Cubs or the Brewers. He was a pitching coordinator, but before that, he was the pitching coach at Vanderbilt. And he talked about there's 2 types of settings in a bullpen. There's over the rubber and there's over the plate. So over the rubber is, like I just said, more internal focus. We're not worried about the execution of the pitch. We're focusing on something mechanical, pitch design, velo focus, something that's just purely over the rubber, not worrying about where it goes. Over the plate is just as it sounds. We're focusing on what is actually happening with the result of the pitch. So this needs to be something that can be very objective from a strike calling standpoint, simulated batters, something that is just execution focused that you can track. The issue that a lot of younger pitchers have, especially, is they try to intermingle both of those things in the same session, which you can do in the same session, but you can't do it in the same set. So, like, let's just say I'm throwing 15 pitches straight. I can't be trying to focus on the shape of my slider, trying to improve a new sweeper, but also expecting to have it down and away in a perfect location, right? You have to decide, what is the focus? Is it in zone, or am I trying to figure out the shape of this pitch today? If it happens to be in zone 2, that's great, but you can't hold yourself to both of those standards because you're going to get frustrated because you're likely not going to get both of those in the same setting. And what I usually recommend, especially if you're a strike thrower, like, let's get that shape dialed in and then let's figure out how to throw it in zone as well. But like, when you get in trouble is when you try to do too many things at one time rather than having your focus narrow on what is actually at hand. So it just simplifies things. It just allows you to, to decide before the bullpen, and hopefully even the day before the bullpen at least, am I focusing over the rubber, or am I focusing over the plate, or am I doing a 2-set bullpen even, to where first set is over the rubber, second set is over the plate?
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that. I usually, when I go in for my bullpens, I have a checklist, probably like 2 or 3 things that I want to get done. And yeah, I'm definitely guilty of having some internal focus up the top. I want to feel this with my body. I want to feel this with my back leg. But then my other 2 are just execution focus. It's like, all right, I want to get my slider dialed. I want to get my cutter dialed. So yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that. But I really like the idea of maybe breaking it up in sets.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
something I want to try for sure.
Well, you can do what you just said, right? Like, you can focus on something mechanical. And let's just say it is one set. You just have to make sure you're not holding yourself accountable to all of those things on one pitch. Like, if you want to
Mhm.
start the bullpen with it being a mechanical focus, like, just to get feel for the slope, get feel for your load or whatever it is mechanically that you're working on, like, decide how many pitches it is that you're actually worrying about that before you're moving on to what's next. You just have to be very clear with what the intention is for every single pitch.
Yeah, and I think when do have an internal focus and I start with that, I think at the end, like my last 10 pitches, I do hold myself to that standard of, all right, I want to feel this with my body and I want to execute. And that's when I run into a little bit of trouble. So
There
yeah.
you go. So those of you that are listening that are in high school and college, professional baseball players do the same thing. So your ability to make those adjustments is what matters most. But every player at every level are guilty of some of the same things. And it's just a matter of learning and figuring out, how you can get better each day.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, okay. So I don't have a printout of this or a PDF version of a 6-day, but I think a 6-day could be important to talk about. Most youth levels hopefully aren't doing a 6-day. I would assume most are doing a 7, but I do know in high school there are some schools where they are on a 6-day. So I don't have a graph of this, but we can talk through it. And this is a very common one in pro ball, especially after you get out of rookie ball and you're in full season. It sounds like even in A ball, you guys are still doing a 7-day, but a lot of teams will do a 6-day at that point. So 6-day would be day 1, you're starting. Day 2, very light throwing, no plyos. Day 3 would be a medium day. So maybe we're doing some mound plyos on this day if you feel okay, throwing at 70 to 80% effort. Day 4 would be your bullpen day. So stretching it out, mound plyos, bullpen. Day 5, light day, very light, 60 to 75 feet, 50 to 60% RPE, no plyos, no bullpen. And then day 6 would be another medium day. It could even be on the lighter side. Once again, comes back to knowing yourself and knowing what you need to do to prepare for that next day. So this could be, 70 to 80%, maybe even closer to 60% if that's what you feel you need. Mound plyos optional, touch and feel optional on this day, whatever you need to do to get ready for the next day. But a 6-day is kind of simple the way it flows. Basically, day 1 is game day. Day 2, to simplify it, you just call this a day after, which means low effort. Day 3 is a day before. So it's the day before either a bullpen or the day before a game. And so anytime you see day before, that just means medium intensity. Day 4 would be bullpen / day of. It's the day of your bullpen. Day 5, day after. Day 6, day before. And then we're back to the beginning of game day.
Yeah, I really like that. And I actually have a question on that. So on the low days, you say no plyos. What do you think that plyos stress the arm a little bit more than playing catch, or what's the reason for saying no plyos?
Sorry, I should have clarified. No mound plyos. So
Oh,
no
mound plyos.
yeah. So you could still do your reverse throws, your pivot picks, your lasso drill, whatever that is. If you need it, that's kind of an optional one for me. But I wouldn't say no to that. But definitely no mound plyos of where after catch play you're getting on the mound and you're doing mechanical focus drills with plyos for 10 throws or something.
Oh,
Does that
okay,
make
yeah,
sense? So just no mound
yeah,
plyos.
yeah, that makes sense. No, I was just wondering because I love the plyos on low days.
Yeah.
I love grabbing the blue ball and just feeling it out, and I think that brings like a lot of blood flow into my arm, and it feels better than playing catch because playing catch actually feels stressful, even if
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going low. So I like throwing the green ball, the 1 pound ball, and the blue ball. Um, the heavier ones, I just love them on a low day.
Yeah, and so this is just a very standardized plan, but you could also replace catch play the day after. If you only want to do plyos, that's perfectly fine. In a lot of cases, that is better because the volume's probably going to be better. Sometimes in catch play, you throw way too much, right? Because you're throwing with another partner and you 10 minutes goes by and you've made 40 throws when it should have been 15 to 20. So sometimes for some guys, just doing plyos is a good option too. So yeah, keep in mind, this is a standard program. You have to know yourself and know what adjustments you might need to make. But if you're following the general framework of the low, medium, high model, you're probably going to be in a good place. And as long as you're respecting those light days, respecting those medium days, and respecting the high days, there's some wiggle room in there on exactly what that looks like for each guy.
Yeah. And something that I want to touch on really quick is not forgetting your routine that made you feel good before the season. And I fell into this trap last year where I had a really good mobility routine for my back. And I've had a bad back. I've had surgery on it and I've had some injuries on it. So I have a really good routine on it. And throughout the off season, I did that every single day. But then the in season comes and I'm busy. We don't have as much time to warm up. We don't have much time to go into the weight room and do mobility. And sometimes I just forgot about it, and that just compounded and compounded, and then I got hurt again later in the season. So a really important thing is to make sure that you're doing what makes you feel good on a daily basis, and making sure that you do that and not forget about it even in season.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to just being disciplined, right? I mean, it's I mean, for you, I mean, if I ask you right now, like, what was the reason you weren't doing it? Was it just you slowly got away from it, or was there a specific cause that you stopped doing it?
Um, it was just like, hey, today we have an event that we have to go to, and then we got to go to this fundraising thing, and then we come back and we have 20 minutes to a stretch. And then so I don't have any time, and then I completely forget about it, and I go out to stretch, and afterwards it's just a game. And then it was just like in season things get like busy, and it wasn't really like a discipline thing. It was just like, oh, like I was just busy and I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think something that helps me, and I think could maybe help, some high school kids, because high school kids and college kids, you have school. Usually you go straight from school to practice or a game. You have homework at night. Like, it can be very easy to lose track of time and not to be able to do the things that you need to do or that you were doing during the off season because you had more time. Writing things down or having it printed out, having something on your phone that alerts you, something that you can actually see what your routine is, I think will help a lot of guys stay on top of their things, because it can be easy to let things slip when it's just in my mind. If I tell myself, hey, yeah, tomorrow I need to make sure I do this, this, and this, but if I don't write it down or I don't have something to remind me or I don't have a concrete plan, it can slip my mind very easily. And I'm a very routine oriented person. So it comes natural for me usually to make programs and to have things to follow. But if I don't have that, I'm just as guilty as anyone of not following what I need to do. So that would be my advice to guys listening that struggle with this. Like, have your routine written down. Doesn't mean you're going to follow to a T every day. Life happens, things come up. But 9 out of 10 times, you're going to be able to follow this because you know exactly what you have today and you can plan for it based on what your schedule is to make sure you're able to stay on top of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm also a very routine oriented guy, but I think during the off season, sorry, I was going into the gym at the same time every day. And so it was easy for me to follow it.
Yep.
But during the season, when the games are at different times and you need to get ready at different times and your routine's kind of thrown off, it becomes a lot more difficult to follow that routine. So I think, yeah, writing it down, especially in my notes in my phone or something, and then looking at it every day, that would really help.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I want to touch on routines, this is sort of in a different realm. It's more so on like pregame bullpens and your pregame routine. But I don't know if you saw this. Adam Wainwright was mic'd up for a bullpen. Was it last year? Was he retired last year? I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago now. But he was mic'd up for a bullpen where he was basically talking through his whole pregame routine. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see it.
Oh, it was incredible. I'll share it with you after this. But he basically was talking through what he follows, what he likes to do. Like, this was literally during a game. He's mic'd up talking through this as he's warming up to go pitch. And one thing that he talked about was routines are good. Like, it's good to have a routine of what you like to do each day on game day. He said, but you have to be adaptable. If something happened right now, he's like, I know I could get ready to pitch in 6 throws right here. And my routine might change, but I know I'll be ready to compete out there on the mound in 6 pitches. Some guys get so reliant on their routines, especially pregame routines, to where if there's a rain delay or something happens, they don't feel the same mentally. They can't perform in their mind, or they have an excuse if the performance goes bad because they didn't get to do their full hour-long warm-up, or they had to rush their pregame bullpen, or something happened. Routines are important, but you have to be adaptable, and there's going to be things that come up. Life happens. So if we're not adaptable, the second adversity comes, we're not going to be able to handle it. And then we're just going to be pointing to that as an excuse. So I thought that was really cool to see Adam Wainwright talk about. I'll definitely have to share that, and I'll put that in the show notes as well for the listeners.
Yeah, that's super interesting. But how do you think you should counter that? I can't really think of any off the top of my head. Maybe like I'm thinking maybe you have well, this is actually something that I do is like have like 3 mandatory things that I'm going to do before I go out, but everything else is just like accessories. It's going to make me feel better, I think, but it's not mandatory. But these 3 things for me usually it's I need to roll out my back. And then I need to do my spine hygiene routine, which is a just a mobility thing, and then my bands and plyos. And as long as I do those three things, I'm pretty warm and I'm good to go. What do you think about that?
I love the way you just put that. What are your 2 or 3 things that you absolutely need to do? Everything else you can get away with. I think that's perfect. And I actually was thinking the same exact things. It would have been not the rolling out part, but it would have been plyos and bands. I like to do those, and making sure I leave myself enough time to, throw a couple of each of my pitches or something like that. But I think it's a good way to think through that lens of, okay, what are the mandatory things that I do need to do to be physically and mentally prepared to pitch? Because I'm thinking of high school kids, especially. They, for road games, I mean, sometimes you get off the bus and the game starts in 30 to 40 minutes. I mean, you got to be ready to go quick. So, yeah, and you can't not do anything. So you got to make sure like you know exactly what you need to do. So it comes back to like, yeah, I do kind of need to have a routine. Yes, some days it might need to be expedited a little bit, but if I have no clue what I'm doing any given day, a day like that where I have to be ready to pitch in 30 minutes and I get off the bus and I've been sitting in class for 7 hours, I'm probably not going to be as mentally locked in or as physically ready as I could have been. So have that routine, be adaptable, and go from there.
Mm. And this is actually something that I got out of. It's called the ABC goal system. Have you ever heard of that?
No, tell me about it.
No. So the ABC goal system is having three goals. So your A goal is best case scenario. So best case scenario, we're gonna get all of our stuff done. We're gonna be warm. We're gonna be mentally and physically prepared to go pitch. And B is all right. I wasn't able to do my accessory stuff, but I was able to do my mandatory stuff. So I'm good to go. And the C is, well, you know, I haven't really been able to get too ready, but I'm still ready to go. And so having that mindset allowed me to be like, all right, even if I don't get my A or even my B, I'll at least be able to go out and compete and not lose or like not mentally take myself out of the game.
That's great. So I'd be curious, have you ever tracked how many games over the course of a season were A, B, and C? Is that the idea? Is it to track those things to see like how many games are you actually in that A and B territory versus the C?
Um, no, I've never really tracked it, and I use the ABC goal system more for like different things. And this is only I've only just started applying it to baseball because it's I got it from outside of baseball. So it was actually from a marathon runner, and he said that there are ABC goals. A is best case scenario time, but if you're not on pace for that, a lot of people are going to give up and be like, "Oh, I'm not going to hit my time, so I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to quit." But no, if you have your B and C, your B is all right. At least maybe I can hit this time, and then the C is all right. At least I'll finish the race. So it's a way of just mentally staying in the game and not giving up.
Now, as you were saying that, I actually have heard of this. Who was it that you saw this from?
Um, I'm not too sure, but I know I read it from a newsletter from Sahil Bloom,
I was
but
just
I
say I
think
thought
he
it was
got it
Sahil.
from
That's where I
somewhere
heard it.
else. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard,
Yeah.
and I think I heard him talk about it on a podcast too. It might be Nick Bear. Do you
Mm.
know who Nick Bear is?
No, I don't.
So Nick Bear is he owns a supplement company, BPN, or not BPN. Is it? No, it's Bear Performance or something. But he had a podcast with him and Sahil Bloom and someone else. I'm blanking. Oh, maybe Sam Parr for My First Million.
Hmm.
But they were talking about that, or Sahil was talking about that process, and I think it could be applied to pitching. Not necessarily from, it can be applied, of course, to your routine and everything that we were just talking about, but even from a performance standpoint, you're not going to have your A game every week, right? I mean, I think they say, if you have 30 starts in a season, 10 you're going to feel great, 10 you're going to feel okay, 10 you're going to be fighting the whole time to try to get through the game. The more of those A games, obviously, the better. But if you can break them up into small goals, let's just say, you give up a 3 spot in the first inning, the game's not over, right? There's
Hmm.
plenty of time to get your team back in it. But if you fold, if you give up after that first 3-run inning, the next inning is going to be bad again, and then you're probably going to be pulled out of the game. And now your bullpen is coming in to have to cover 7 innings, and you guys are fighting to win a game. Maybe you do come back and win it, but now your bullpen has been stretched thin for the next night. But if you have the mindset of, okay, 3 runs, okay, let's make an adjustment here, 1 pitch at a time, 1 inning at a time. Maybe you end up getting through 5 innings. Yes, you gave up 3, maybe 4 runs, but you got through 5 innings and your team is still in the game. And now your bullpen isn't having to cover 7 innings. Like, all those little things add up. They might not seem like it at the time, or you might be frustrated and mad that you gave up a 3 spot in the first and it didn't go the way you envisioned. But if you're not careful, it can snowball on you and it can become a terrible outing versus just an okay or slightly bad outing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I just love that. And now that you talk about it, I guess it can be applied to everything in baseball. But I just love it because as long as you stay in the game and you keep fighting and you don't mentally give up, you don't know what will happen. You might completely flip it and just dominate after that happens. So I think it's a really valuable tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to use that with different things in my life too. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So before we end this, let's talk about relievers, because let's be honest, it's easy to have routines when you're a starter. When you're a relief pitcher, it's a different animal. Have you been a reliever before?
I haven't, no.
So I have a little bit of experience with it, but I'll tell you firsthand. So college, high school starter, college starter, my whole career. I get to indie ball, made a start. My first game was a start, and then I got moved to the bullpen, and I had no clue what to do. I was lost from a lifting standpoint, from a throwing standpoint. Like I said before, I am a very routine-oriented person. So when I was starting, I knew exactly what I was going to do every day between outings. But now I'm in the bullpen. I pitched that night, but I'm also available the next night. In indie ball, they don't care about pitch counts and how many days off you have. So I pitched that night. I'm available again the next night, most likely. So now it's like, okay, what do I do today? Do I just do light throwing? What do I do? Okay, I didn't pitch. Next day, I'm available again. Do I do light throwing, medium throwing? And maybe I go 5 days without pitching, but I was hot every night, so I didn't want to do too much in catch play. And now I look up, a week's gone by, and I've hardly done anything other than just light catch. So I think it's really, really important that we have a routine as a reliever, but it's very, very adaptable. So I want to just walk through a couple ideas, and this is just a very standard program that can be adjusted. But let's just say day 1 is a day you pitched in a game. We'll just assume you treated it like a medium throwing day. You went 120 feet, maybe you did a little bit of mound plyos, something moderate. Day 2, I would say regardless, even if you're hot the next day, which hopefully most amateurs that are listening to this, hopefully you are not hot the next night. But if you are hot the next night, very light throwing. And in college, obviously, you think about college baseball, they are throwing back-to-back games frequently, especially when it's a Friday to Sunday series. Your closer might throw Friday and Saturday. And I'm sure at the end of the season, there's situations where some guys are throwing 3 days in a row. So we got to make sure that we're handling our volume and our workload effectively. So regardless, I would say if you pitched the previous night, that next day, you were going super, super light throwing, moving the arm, but you are still throwing if you are available that night. Day 3, let's just assume you did not throw that day. Day 3 would be a moderate day. So 90 to 120, 70, 80% effort, maybe do some mound plyos. Let's assume you still didn't pitch that day, day 3. Now, day 4, we are either throwing a bullpen or we are throwing live in the game. Now, this is a tricky one. Some people are okay with throwing a light bullpen before the game. Now, in pro ball, this is very common. You might throw a touch and feel, at 4 o'clock or whatever time it is when you guys are throwing. And then you might pitch out of the bullpen that night at 9 o'clock. That's just kind of the way it goes. You have to get your work in. And, sometimes you're going to throw a touch and feel and throw it again that exact same night. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but sometimes it does. Another option, especially in high school or college, if possible, what you could do is don't throw your pregame bullpen and hope that you pitch that night. And if you don't pitch that night, throw a bullpen after the game. Now, this isn't ideal for the catcher. It's not ideal for the coaches, but sometimes it's necessary. And this is probably the best way to do it. So you are fully fresh for the game, but if you don't pitch, you're able to get your bullpen in. So in summary, I wouldn't go any more than 2 straight off days without touching the mound. If I'm touching the mound every 3 days, I'm going to stay sharp. I'm going to stay ready to go. Because the last thing you want, especially if you're a guy that is near the bottom of the totem pole on your team, coming out of the bullpen, you're not throwing a ton of innings. The last thing you want to do is go 1 to 2 weeks or even longer without throwing a significant amount on the mound. And then you finally get your opportunity in the game and you're just not ready. You're just not ready because you haven't been on the mound. And you might only get that one opportunity. And you want to make sure you're as prepared as you possibly can. No bullpen or bullpens are not going to, they're not the same as a game. But man, if you're not touching the mound and you're expected to compete and prove your worth, 2 weeks in without throwing in a game, you want to be as sharp as you can and as ready as you can go. So that would be my advice. No more than 2 days off. Treat those light days light, but also be careful not to let too many light days go in a row without touching the mound.
Yeah. And what I see in Pro Bowl is honestly, they just do a moderate day and a touch and feel every day until they throw. And then they get in a game. They might do a really light day the next day and they just repeat and they just go moderate touch and feel until they get in a game.
Yeah, no, that's great. And when you start doing that on a consistent basis, and assuming you're keeping the volume in check and you're keeping the intensity in check, you start to get used to that, and you're going to feel more prepared. Everything's going to stay sharp. Just have to be careful with the volume. Like I had a pitcher the last couple of years that he honestly would throw harder in his touch and field than he did in the game. It was incredible.
Right.
I had never seen anything like it. He would
That's
throw
crazy.
92, 93. He would touch a 4 and touch field. First of all, I was like, dude, throw slower. You might pitch tonight. So don't blow it all right now. And then you go in the game and be 90, 91. I'm like, dude, do you not understand that you're overdoing it in your touch and feel? And then you're not ready to go in the game because you've thrown too much and too hard. So definitely want to keep that in check. If you can have a radar gun, use it so that you know where your velocity is exactly. So radar guns, yes, they're good to see your max velocity, but it's also really good to make sure you're staying at the right threshold and at a certain intensity.
Yeah, I love that. And I might actually be a reliever this year, so I'm definitely going to steal that and steal this plan right here.
Perfect. Well, last thing, I mean, we'll briefly touch on it. Like, I know this is more of a pitching podcast, but I think lifting and the conditioning, all those things, I think that's an important conversation because I know a lot of players that once the season comes along, they don't lift, they don't do anything. And then by the end of the season, they're dragging, they're weaker, their velocity's down. And to me, not working out is just not an option. So I would love to hear what your lifting schedule is as a starter in between starts. And I know you're a little bit different since you've had, your back injuries. I know you're not lifting as intensely, but walk me through, what your weekly schedule looks like from a lifting and conditioning standpoint.
Yeah. I've actually got a lot more smart with this year. And so previously it wouldn't change. Every time I'd go out on the mound, the next day I would go heavy and I would train for strength and the loads would be up. But what I started to find was that I recovered better if I had a lighter lifting day after my game day. So now what I do is I'll go in a game, I'll pitch however many innings, and then the next day, the lift day, instead of going heavy with, legs, back squat, bench, like going heavy and the stuff that's really going to break down the muscle, I really try to keep it like a blood flow day. So I'm keeping my weights a little bit lighter, my reps a little bit higher. And this is a feel thing. You're going to have to feel it out for yourself and what actually feels good for you. But for me, that really works and getting the blood flow going. Now, when I throw a bullpen, we lift on the same day. So those are the days where I'm trying to make a little bit of progress and maintenance on my strength and power. So I'm going heavier on my compound lifts and I'm getting my power work in on those days.
Perfect. So 2 lifts a week then in between starts?
Yes. Yeah, we do two lifts.
Nice. What about conditioning? Is there any like sprint work or anything?
Oh, conditioning. Yeah, every day. That's
Every day?
my
Ooh.
least favorite. Every day, yeah.
What type of stuff?
And especially in spring training, they're trying to get our like they're trying to get our cardiovascular going. So They're actually really tough. The conditioning
Like what
pre-throwing. Yeah.
pre-throw? Ooh, even worse.
Yeah. The other day we had tempo runs, and so it was 60-yard sprints at 7 seconds. And we were like, what? Oh, sorry, 60-yard sprints at 8 seconds. So it was pretty much just a sprint, and we would do that 10 times.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about pitchers here, so I mean, yeah, I mean, some of those guys probably can't even run it in 8 seconds.
Yeah, most of us didn't make it. Like, I probably made like 8 out of 10 of them, but a lot of people didn't make even half of them.
Wow. Okay. So, and
Mhm.
that's every day. What about once games start? Is it like one to 2 days a week of conditioning?
Once games start, no, we still do it every day. It's just a lot lighter.
Even in season, once you go to your affiliate?
Yeah,
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's
yeah.
more than I've heard from other teams.
hmm
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the load is a little bit lower, and maybe if I remember correctly, we do have like an agility day um, in there, so that it's not all just conditioning. But yeah, we definitely run every single day.
Okay, got it. So
Mhm.
my plan is a little bit different from what I usually recommend with guys. Like I usually don't recommend any more than two running days a week in season. It's just, in my opinion, just not fully necessary. Like, and a lot of times the conditioning is what's breaking down guys the most. Now, if you're built up to it and you like it, you feel good, that's one thing. But a lot of times guys just get beat up from running too much in season. And at the amateur levels, a lot of times it's kind of a filler thing because they don't know what else to have their pitchers do. So they'll have them run or do something along those lines. It from a starter standpoint, a 7-day schedule, definitely 2 lifts a week. There is a possibility of 3 lifts a week in some cases, depending on how important the weight room is for that individual. So let's just say you want to get 3 lifts in. I would do the day after you pitch a lower body lift. Day 3, so 2 days after you pitch, would be an upper body lift. So those are going to be like your 2 bigger lift days just because you're going to have the most time to recover before your next outing. And then day 4 would be cardio day. So you could do some sprint based work that day, or you could even tie it into honestly the day 2 day with the lifting and conditioning, or with the lifting the lower body. And that way day 4 can be an off day. And then day 5 is your bullpen day / full body workout. So this one's going to be more of a moderate intensity lift, but doing compound lifts, full body exercises for the most part, or sorry, not full body exercises, but lifting full body. So doing lower and upper. And then day 6 potentially could be a short sprint day, low volume. Day 7 would be no conditioning, no lifting, and then obviously pitch the next day. The other option would be just 2 full body lifts in there, as well as 1 to 2 conditioning days. It could be the day after you pitch is your full body lift, and then also your bullpen day would be your full body lift. And then for a 6-day rotation, definitely just 2 lifts a week. Day after, and then the day of a bullpen would be 2 full body lifts. So it's it doesn't take much. You don't have to lift the house. You don't have to be in there for an hour and a half. If you're lifting, doing some big lifts, getting a couple accessory lifts in, and you're doing it consistently in season, I promise you're going to feel better by the end of the season than if you were to do nothing. Because I've done that. I did that when I became a reliever, going back to that, my first year of indie ball. I didn't know when to lift because I didn't want to be sore. I didn't want to be fatigued, like you were saying earlier. And as a result, I ended up hardly ever lifting. And I lost so much strength. I lost weight. My velo was down. I was not good by the end of the year. And then I made the adjustment the following year, got on a good lifting schedule. I know like there's a Taylor Rogers with the Twins, or sorry, he's not the Twins anymore. I don't know who he's with now, actually. Do you know who he's with? Is he with the Giants? Lefty?
I'm not sure.
He's got the twin brother, Tyler Rogers, the submarine guy for the Giants. But he was with the Twins, and our strength coach with the Twins, he said with Taylor, he was the closer. He's like, no matter what, he lifted, I want to say it was like Tuesday and Friday, full body lift. It didn't matter if he pitched, didn't pitch. He just was going to lift every Tuesday and every Friday. Rain or shine, those were going to be his lift days. And I like that because as a reliever, it's so unpredictable. You don't know when you're going to pitch. And if you're not careful, you're going to go weeks without lifting. And then when you do finally lift, that is when you get sore. But when you're consistently working out, like you're not going to get that fatigued or that sore. It's when you haven't done it for a while and then you shock the body with it. So do it from the beginning, stay consistent, monitor the volume and intensity, and you'll be fine.
hmm Yeah, that's how they do it in Pro Bowl as well. It's just they have 2 days where they lift, and it doesn't matter what you did. Relievers are just lifting in the morning. I think it might have actually been Tuesday, Fridays as well, and they're not going to stray from that.
I love it. As always, dude, this was a great show. Hopefully the listeners got some value out of it, but I know I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. This was a good one.